Hey guys, Idris here from Just Another Night. So, for those of you who tuned into last week's video, you'll know for today I'll be doing a bit of a Q&A video. Quite a few people left some comments down below on the last video, so I'll be answering those today. Before I get into it though, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. It really does help us out, and it gives us a lot of feedback as to whether or not this is going well for us, or if there's anything we can improve on for you guys. So without further ado, let's jump into the first question. First question that came up, it was a bit of a two-part question. It was, are films better than the comics, or is there more scope to develop characters in the comics? So I'll start by answering the first question, which is, are films better than the comics? It goes both ways with this one. So yes, films can be better than the comics. Everyone loves to see, the visuals that go on a piece of paper on the big screen. And it works well more so for your smaller productions than it does for the big ones. And what I mean by this is things that don't need to use a lot of CGI or a lot of sort of supernatural events or aliens and things like that. The reason for this is because they can use their budget a lot better. And that's one of the key factors going into this is when you're converting a comic into a film, the budget is what matters. You won't be able to necessarily pull off one of the biggest sort of events on a tight budget. Some examples basically of a film that's been pulled off well would be The Watchmen. I think was quite a great film. Even Hellboy, I thought that was done pretty well. And the Spider-Man, for example, despite people's opinions on him, I thought as comics to films, it was done well. But, and there is a huge but, and that is the writers themselves. So what you see tends to happen is they tend to go off script a little, or things get altered here and there, and that's when it starts to fall apart. And don't get me wrong, it still makes for a good film, but it won't necessarily stay true to the comic itself. And that's been seen to happen multiple times. Take Justice League for example, or even Batman vs Superman. They kind of went off of what happened in the comics, and that led to an enormous catastrophe of it not doing well whatsoever. So like I said, it can go both ways. It can either go very well or very badly. It does tend to go well with the smaller animated films though. So DC likes to put out a lot of their own animated films. We've had The Killing Joke, we've had Batman Bad Blood, as well as Batman Red Hood, and a huge array of many others. And those get done really well, and I think that's down to the fact that they stick to the script. It's animated, so the budget's quite small to begin with anyway, and they're able to develop it more purely because it's animated. And in those cases, the films can turn out really well. What I would like to see would be a large-scale event done well, such as something like Marvel's Secret Wars. But again, it requires such a huge budget in order to do so. The second part of that question was, is there more room to develop characters in comic books? And hands down the answer is yes. This is purely to the fact of if you were to take a film budget and you translate that to paper, for example, to make a comic book, you're able to do a lot more with it. And with comic books, what tends to happen over the issues, a story's progressing, whereas with a film, you've kind of got that one film to put everything into it, and that won't necessarily always work. You've got to sort of bank on the fact of, okay, if the film does well, then we'll get more money to develop the character further. Whereas a comic doesn't really need to think about it in those kind of terms. You can do as many issues as you want, and it's still going to keep going, because a comic book isn't necessarily done in one issue unless it's a one-shot, and it takes a larger amount of time to get through the story as well, which gives them plenty of time to develop a character, to delve into their thoughts and their feelings. Not everyone's going to have the success that MCU did with being able to develop characters over a huge array of films. I think they got quite lucky with it because they had great writers, and because they had great writers, the films came out quite well, which is why they managed to keep getting the funding over and over to keep producing those films. But like I said, not every single superhero film is going to be that lucky. So that's why, hands down, comic books are better to develop characters. So the second question I was asked was, what would you recommend for a young teen new to the comic book scene? And this comes largely down to personal tastes. Because you have various comic books and graphic novels that span across different genres, it's not easy to say this specific one is going to be the one for everyone. For me personally, the first comic book I ever read, I think, was a crossover between Batman and Wolverine. But that relates to a later question, so I'll go into detail more on that later on. But there was also the graphic novel for Artemis Fowl, which was a popular novel back in the day. And for whatever reason, they decided to make a comic book version of it, and that was probably one of the first comic books that I read and really sort of pushed me into reading more comics. So I think for a young teen, that's probably a good start because it involves a bit of the supernatural, a bit of the real world, I guess, and it follows a teenager. Another one I would recommend would probably be Teen Titans. There's various iterations of the Teen Titans, but they tend to have some very interesting stories, and again, it's about teenagers, so they can relate to it. Spider-Man's also another great one to get into. Again, that delves more towards the superhero aspect of things, and a lot can happen in a Spider-Man comic. There's various issues now, such as the Amazing Spider-Man. There's Ultimate Spider-Man as well, so maybe checking out some of those definitely help. And I think if you want something that, takes on a lot of characters, something to give you a more wider view on what's available, I would recommend something along the lines of one of the big events. So Marvel Civil War, Marvel Secret Wars, or even the Justice League comics. With those, it helps you get an idea of all the different characters you can follow. So if there's any specific characters that stand out to you, okay, well, Green Lantern is quite appealing to me. You can then go check out the Green Lantern comics. Same with the Marvel stuff. If you, in reading something like Secret Wars, a certain character stands out, it gives you a better indication of the stuff you'd like. So as a young teen just coming to comics, those are the ones that I would recommend, just because it gives a bit of variety. But anything really, like there's a lot of things out there now, from comics to webtoons to mangas. There's a lot of stuff to pull people in. I would recommend webtoons as well, actually. Those tend to be done by amateur artists, but they can be quite good. And there's a lot of variety in what's out there. And it's free. So everyone loves a free comic book, don't they? But yeah, if you download the Webtoon app, there's plenty available there that you can flick through and see what you like. So the next question I got was, what was the best comic you've read and why? And for me, that's quite an easy question. The answer for that is Batman the Killing Joke. And it was the first review I'd done for the channel, so you would have heard me talk a lot about it then. But my reasonings for liking that so much was, I was always quite a big fan of the Joker's stories. Not because of the whole romanticisation of it that's been occurred with it over the couple of years, but more so that he and Batman had some very nitty gritty stories. There was a lot of sort of lore surrounding Joker as well, in terms of who is he, how did he come to be. There was things about Joker, such as the fact that there has always been a Joker since the start of Gotham. There was another iteration where Joker had a Lazarus pit to himself, which is why he was always around. But with The Killing Joke, it kind of cemented his origins. It gave him sort of a firm footing for the character, as well as development of the relationship between Batman and the Joker, and as well as Joker's ideology. Like, it was quite compelling, in the sense of it kept you like really deep into the story. And yeah, it was very sort of graphic, it was very nitty gritty and dark and twisted, but those are the kind of comics I tend to like as well. So yeah, I know Killing Joke is hands down one of my favourite comics out there. So the next question I got was, what got you into comics and why? Also, what websites would you recommend when wanting to read comics online? The thing that kind of got me into comics, I guess, was more because I preferred like visual things to sort of having to make it up, if that makes sense. I read a lot of books as a kid, but I always had a preference for comics because I could see how scenes and events played out. I was always big into my anime and things prior to reading comics, as well as watching films and things like that. The first comic book I ever read happened to be a crossover between Marvel and DC. Here in the UK we've got a shop called The Works. They tend to sell a lot of arts and crafts stuff as well as books and things. But they used to have big bins outside the store which would have a ton of stuff in there, and they'll be selling them for 99p. And I remember walking past my mum once, and we used to pop in occasionally to pick up things like pencils and paints and stuff like that to keep us busy during the holidays. I had a look in the bin, and there was this pack full of, I think there was about 3 or 4 comics in there. But the main one in there was Dark Claw, which was a crossover between Batman and Wolverine. And that was the first proper comic that I ever read. And from that point on, I guess I was kind of hooked. It probably wasn't the most ideal comic for like a 9-year-old kid at the time. Because I mean, Batman and Wolverine aren't the most child-friendly of characters. So having them cross over was a bit gory. But it was such a great comic, and that's what kind of pushed me to read more. I was always watching the superhero cartoons like X-Men and Spider-Man and Batman and whatnot. So this just allowed me to get more of the stories and not have to wait for them to come onto TV. So that was basically what kind of got me into comics. The other part of that question was what websites would I recommend when reading comics online? I will tell you now, all the websites I recommend do require a subscription or some form of payment. There's a couple out there. The main one that I tend to use is Comixology. It's an Amazon company, but the great thing about them is that they have basically everything. So they'll have your Marvel comics, your DC comics, as well as the other ones such as Dark Horse, Amalgam, and a couple of others. With Comixology, what you do is it's similar to Amazon Kindle. You basically buy your comic online, and then you've got it available on your app to read whenever you like. Like I said, it's great purely because it has nearly everything. There's been very few things on there that I haven't seen, whereas other websites such as Marvel Unlimited will solely be your Marvel comics. Like I said, Marvel Unlimited is subscription based, whereas Comixology you will pay per comic you buy. They do have free comics available as well, so definitely go check it out. I know if you're an Amazon Prime member, you can actually get The Boys through them for free. So yeah, Comixology is definitely the one that I would recommend for people. So the next question I had was, if you could be any DC superhero or villain, who could I be? And that's a pretty tough one. So if I want to be someone, I want to be someone who's got great abilities, and obviously there's tons of them out there. Ones that tend to stand out for me are like Flash, like having super speed would be absolutely great. Even Blue Beetle having that sort of alien bug to give you all those kinds of different weapons and armors would be a lot of fun. Not that you need it in this kind of day. But I think it may have to be Dr. Fate. His mastery over magic is pretty great. There's a lot you could do with it. You know, he can teleport, he can throw bolts of lightning. There's all sorts, like it's absolutely limitless with what he can do. And I feel like that could be a lot of fun. There's a lot of different things you can play around with. So Dr. Fate will probably have to be my answer for that one. And so the final question comes from our very own Curtis. I should have seen this coming, to be honest, but his question is, if I got Goku and Superman and put them in a cage, who would win in a fight and why? I want a detailed analysis. Curtis, I know you're not going to want to hear it, and again there's a lot of things to take into account with something like this, but my money's on Superman winning, purely for the fact of, with Goku, like, he gets stronger as he gets defeated. Superman, however, was made to be invincible, and his only weakness is kryptonite. So if you were to put them in a cage, I feel like if they were both fighting all out, 100% serious, my money's on Superman just on the fact that he can heal, and there wouldn't be much to hurt him against Goku. And I feel like Superman would kind of just tear Goku apart before Goku could do much, because Superman's got his speed, he's got, you know, skin of steel, he's got his laser vision, he's got his frost breath. Goku's got his super strength, well, I'll say super strength, but you know, he's got his Saiyan forms, and his ki, and that's about it. So I kind of feel like Goku's outmatched. However, if the situation was different, and we weren't talking a cage match, we were talking out in the open, and they sort of got into it the way a normal person, or the way they normally do, which is where they sort of start off by restraining themselves, you know, going lightly to test what each other's got, then I think it may edge out to Goku, but I don't think Goku would beat Superman. I feel like he'd have a better chance, but unless Goku's able to grab a hold of some kryptonite, unfortunately Goku's going to lose. So I hope that's detailed enough for you, mate. But yeah, Superman would probably win. So thanks for listening, guys. That brings us to the end of our little Q&A video. I do hope you enjoyed it. I'm more than happy to do more in the future. Also, to celebrate Halloween, we are going to be doing a bit of a reaction video. So me and Curtis are going to be playing some spooky games. And you'll basically get to see how we react to it. So hopefully it's quite entertaining. But make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Stay safe, and I hope you all have a good time.